is Secretary Kathy Boockvar. And Kathy Boockvar has served as the Secretary of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania since January 5th, 2019. In this role, she leads the Pennsylvania Department of State. The mission of the department is to promote the integrity of the electoral process, to support economic development, corporate filings and transactions, and to protect the health and safety of the public through professional licensure. The department upholds the highest standards of ethics and competence in the areas of elections, campaign finance, notarization, professional and occupational licensure, charitable solicitations, and professional boxing, wrestling, and mixed martial arts. Secretary Boockvar is an attorney with an extensive background in public interest law and policy, election administration, and nonprofit healthcare administration. And she's worked in the public, private, and nonprofit sector. Most recently, she served as senior advisor to the governor on election modernization, leading and managing initiatives to improve security and technology in Pennsylvania's elections and voting systems, in collaboration with federal, state, and county officials. Secretary Boockvar has quite a long and accomplished resume, and we are so honored to have her here this afternoon. So thank you all. We want to give her an online clap, hand clap. Thank you so much, Secretary.
Thank you.
Our program, thank you. And just so that I can give you all a lay of the program of what we're going to do, we're going to have Secretary Boockvar give a keynote address, and the title of her address is Valiant Women of the Vote. And then later we're going to have really special addition of Commissioner Yinks and also Commissioner Sarathia, as well as myself, share our reflections on voting and the importance of it at this time. And as I'm switching from the camera, it's difficult when you're trying to host a meeting and also do something. Just allow me 1 second while I pull up my document. I'm going to share with you a very pivotal piece from a very famous women's abolitionist and suffragette, and her name is Sojourner Truth. This piece is entitled Ain't I a Woman? And just allow me 1 moment to access it.
And while we're waiting for you, Tamika, if we can remind everyone, we just put it in the chat. If you could just mute your phones so that we can limit the background information or noise. In addition, we want to welcome all of the PHRC staff, all of the staff from the Secretary's division, and all of our stakeholders in the Commonwealth. Welcome to our rescheduled Women's History Month event. We also take into consideration that today is the 19th anniversary of 9/11, so that's not lost on us. But we definitely wanted to make sure that we honored a Women's History Month event, given the backdrop of the pandemic and everything else is going on. So we're glad that we were able to reschedule this. And so once again, welcome to our event this afternoon.
Well, children, there's so much racket, there must be something off kilter. I think that betwixt the Negroes of the South and the women at the North all talking about rights, these white men going to be in the fix pretty soon. But what's all this here talk about? That man over there says that women need to be helped in the carriages and lifted over ditches and to have the best place everywhere. Nobody ever helped me in the carriages or over mud puddles or gives me any best place. Ain't I a woman? Look at me. Look at my arms. I have plowed and planted and gathered in the barns, and no man can head me. And ain't I a woman? I could work as much and eat as much as a man when I could get it, and bear the lash as well. And ain't I a woman? I have borne 13 children and seen most of all of them sold off into slavery. And when I cried out of a mother's grief, none but Jesus heard me. And ain't I a woman? Then they talk about this thing in the head. What is it they call it? What's that? Intellect. That's it, honey. Intellect. Well, what's that got to do with women's rights and Negroes' rights? If my cup will hold but a pint and yours will hold a quart, wouldn't you be mean not to let me have my little half measure? And then that man back over there in the black, that man in the black says that women can't have as much rights as men because Christ wasn't a woman. Well, where did your Christ come from? Where did your Christ come from? From God and a woman. Man had nothing to do with it. Now, if the first woman that God ever made was strong enough to turn this world upside down, these here women alone together ought to be able to turn it back upside right again. And now they asking us to do it, and you men better let us. I oblige to you. Thank you for letting me speak to you this afternoon. Now Sojourner ain't got nothing more to say. Thank you. Thank you. And so that was just a rendering from a speech given by Sojourner Truth back in 1851 at a women's conference. And I just thought it was so fitting and prolific for program today and this time that we find ourselves in. And so without further ado, we will turn the segment of the program over to Secretary Boockvar. Thank you, Secretary.
Thank you so much, and what a powerful piece. I mean, you know, no matter, can you hear me? Can you hear me okay? Okay.
Yes.
You know, no matter how many times you hear that, it's filled with power, and it really emphasizes that, you know, time and place are immaterial for a lot of these things. And, you know, I think that's so apropos of the subject of this, these remarks. I love the Valiant Women of the Vote. We're gonna look back. I'm gonna talk about some of the history. We're gonna look at the present, and then we're gonna look forward some. So thank you all again for having me here today. It's an honor to speak to you all today at the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission's celebration of Women's History Month. And, you know, I want to thank, I'm sorry, my screen is freezing. Sorry, hang on one second. I want to thank you for all the work that you do at the PHRC. But hang on one second, let me just unfreeze my thing here. Sorry.
Okay.
It always happens at the wrong time, right? Okay, give me 1 minute, because I probably can't, I have not memorized the entire remarks here, so apologies. Okay. Technology. I mean, it's incredible, right? Here we are in the middle of a global pandemic. If it weren't for technology, things would have been so much more difficult. But, you know, of course, then it goes down. It doesn't do what we expect it to. So, all right. So, again, it's an honor to be here today, and particularly because of what you all do at the PHRC. I want to thank you because you play such a vital role in making the Commonwealth a better, more equitable, and just place to live and to work. And your work touches so many people's lives in critical realms: employment, housing, property, education, public accommodations, and promotes the kind of equal opportunity to which the suffragists dedicated their lives. Thank you. Although we have had ourselves to endure many delays of so many important events like this one due to COVID-19, our forbearance cannot even come close, of course, to comparing to that of the suffragists. They had to wait 144 years after the birth of our democracy for that most fundamental of citizenship rights, the vote. And it took many decades longer and tragic struggles for many voters of color to actually realize these rights. When our fearless foremothers set their sights on suffrage, they understood that voting is the essential ingredient and continuing sustenance of a democracy. Susan B. Anthony called it the pivotal right. As Pennsylvania's Secretary of State and Chief Election Officer, as well as a former civil rights and voting rights attorney, I am here today to pay tribute to those valiant women of the vote. And then I think you may also want to talk about a little election I understand that we have coming up. So I'm going to give you some updates on recent changes we have made to the voting process to make it more secure and accessible to all eligible voters, and make sure that all of us going forward and as we look to November, know all the different options that are available to us here in Pennsylvania today. But first, let's go back in time. The road to equal voting rights in America has been a very long one, paved at times with staggering injustice, as well as enormous and hard-fought triumphs. While we celebrate these historic anniversaries, they call on us to reflect how the promise of voting rights was not equal in the United States for nearly 200 years. Women, Black men, and their allies were the backbone of the movements to expand voting rights, and they understood the importance of the right to vote, to be valued as citizens of these United States. Those activists who worked for decades to pass the 15th and 19th Amendments and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 understood that they might not live to see the full right to vote in their lifetimes, but nonetheless, they fought hard to ensure that those who came after would have a voice. Last month, we celebrated the centennial of the suffragists' great victory, the addition of the 19th Amendment, granting American women the vote in the United States Constitution. I'm proud to say that the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania embraced women's suffrage relatively early. On June 24th, 1919, Pennsylvania became the 7th state in the Union to ratify the amendment, more than a year before the required 3/4 of states ratified it, finally making it law on August 26, 1920. I'm really proud that Pennsylvania showed this leadership early. Our General Assembly had ratified the amendment by a margin of 153 to 44 in the House and 31 to 6 in the Senate. At the time, we had Governor William Spruill, who sent a communication to the Senate before the vote, calling the cause of suffrage just, and expressing the hope that prompt and favorable action will be taken, and that this Commonwealth may be among the first of the states to sanction this great national reform. And it was. Pennsylvania ratified the amendment just 20 days after it cleared Congress and went to the states. And it sounds like it was quite an exhilarating day in Harrisburg when we did. The Harrisburg Telegraph of June 24th, 1919, reported, tongue-in-cheek, that, quote, at the corner of 3rd and Walnut Streets, shortly before noon today, a concourse of mere men saw the approach of the suffragist advance guard, jazzing up the street in motor cars gaily festooned, bound for the Capitol, their countenances grim and confident. I'm sorry that we can't be gathering and be gaily festooned together today, but we did commemorate Pennsylvania's ratification anniversary with a grand celebration in our Capitol Rotunda in Harrisburg on June 24th, 2019. It was truly an inspiring day to see so many women of all colors of ages wearing suffrage white and cheering the bravery and tenacity of our foremothers. The suffragists who earned us the vote labored long and hard, enduring arrests, hunger strikes, violence, public persecution for their efforts. One of my favorite suffragists was Carrie Chapman Catt. She tirelessly traveled the country advocating for women's right to vote. She was so forward-looking that she even had a prenuptial agreement with her husband, guaranteeing her 4 months every year of free time to work exclusively for suffrage. She used her time wisely. Carrie formed the International Women's Suffrage Alliance, served as the president of the National American Women's Suffrage Association, and after suffrage was finally achieved, founded the League of Women Voters. Today, we also remember those suffragists who did not get the credit and honor they deserved for their hard work. Such African-American women, such as Pittsburgh activist Daisy Lampkin and Philadelphia sisters Margaretta and Harriet Fortin. Daisy Lampkin heeded her own advice that nothing is done unless women do it. She organized consumer protest groups of Black housewives and was elected president of the Lucy Stone Women's Suffrage League in Pittsburgh, which advocated for suffrage for Black women. The Fortin sisters toured and lectured on suffrage and gathered signatures for petitions. They were also abolitionists. Another leader was Frances Harper, who settled in Philadelphia in 1890. She was an abolitionist and suffragist who understood the complex issues within these movements. In 1866, she spoke at the National Women's Rights Convention, where she called for equality not just between Black men and women, but between white women and Black women. She noted that everyone's rights are intertwined, saying we are all bound up together in one great bundle of humanity, and society cannot trample on the weakest and feeblest of its members without receiving the curse in its own soul. Those are powerful words. Many African-American women spoke out for suffrage while enduring the twin evils of racism and sexism, because they understood that from suffrage flowed equality and empowerment. But they had to wait even longer and struggle even harder than their white counterparts. As monumental as the suffragist victory was in 1920, it remained incomplete for another 45 years until the Voting Rights Act of 1965 ensured African-American citizens unfettered access to the polling booth. Last year, I was honored to join 17 other secretaries of state from around the country on a pilgrimage to Selma, Birmingham, and Montgomery, Alabama. We visited some of the nation's most sacred historical landmarks to share, witness, and try to absorb the historical moments and landmarks that epitomize the devastating struggles and inspiring achievements of the voting rights movement. It was a humbling and inspiring experience and a poignant reminder that we have all been granted the opportunity and responsibility to make a difference in this world and to leave it a better place. In Selma, we linked arms and crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge, where Dr. Martin Luther King, John Lewis, and other giants of the movement had marched 55 years ago. Their perilous march helped persuade President Johnson to sign the Voting Rights Act of 1965. One of those other long ago marchers was C. Dolores Tucker of Philadelphia. In 1971, she went on to become Pennsylvania's Secretary of State and the first African-American woman to hold that position in any state in our country. As one of her successors, serving at a time when it is far more common for women to hold office, though not nearly common enough, I am mindful that the 19th Amendment gave us access to more than just the polling booth. It led to an acceptance of women in all aspects of public life, including elected and appointed service on the local, state, and national levels. Pennsylvania elected our first woman to Congress in 1949. Veronica Grace Boland of Scranton ran in a special election to fill out the remaining two months of her late husband's term. In 2018, we broke a record here in Pennsylvania, electing 4 women to the United States House of Representatives among a delegation of 18 members. Pennsylvania's history has also been enriched by the election and appointment of African-American women to key government posts over the last century. In 1938, Philadelphia elected the first African-American woman state legislator in the United States, Crystal Byrd Fawcett. And Secretary of State Tucker made a difference in her lifetime by encouraging many Black women to vote, run for office, and participate in policymaking. She also called for the appointment of more women to the judiciary and more African Americans to boards and commissions. The Commonwealth is a better place with more opportunities for all because of such leaders like her. Progress continues, though we still have a long way to go. In the last few years, we saw more women, including women of color, elected to office than ever before, but it's nowhere near enough. Women now make up 25% of the Pennsylvania General Assembly, with the highest number of women ever elected in both the State House and the State Senate. And we're still at 25%. We also have more female representation in the judiciary. 3 women serve out of 7 on the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, and women make up a majority of judges on both the Superior Court and the Commonwealth Court. I'm proud to be one of 8 women in Governor Wolf's cabinet, and 8 women also serve on the governor's executive staff. I don't need to tell you that we could do better. For example, Pennsylvania has never elected a woman to the US Senate or to the governor's office, and it has only elected 11 women to the United States House of Representatives in history. So how do we change this? We need to keep encouraging women and people of color to run for office and participate in the public arena. We need more women in leadership, not just because we are highly effective leaders, and we are, but also because we can be powerful role models for our daughters and our granddaughters. Women leaders have long been known for our willingness to work across the aisle and to forge compromises. Research shows that women legislators of both parties give higher priority to bills and policies dealing with childcare, child support, domestic violence, economic equity, education, family and medical leave, healthcare, and I could go on and on. In the United States, research shows that women are on average 31% more successful in advancing legislation than their male peers. Perhaps that's because when formulating policy, women tend to rely on a wider circle of individuals and to opt for more transparency. Also, women literally help give government a good name. In a study of 31 democracies around the world, the larger presence of women in legislatures positively correlated with higher perceptions of government. Likewise, in business, women leaders bring better conditions. Multiple studies show that companies with strong female leadership generated on average a 10% return on equity, compared with a 7.4% return for those without strong presence of women, and a significant positive correlation between women in corporate leadership and improved company performance. And yet, only about 5% of CEOs of Fortune 500 companies are women. And only 26% of US senators and 23% of US representatives are women. And this is when the total number of women in Congress is at an all-time high. So, what can we do to improve these statistics? We can encourage more women to run for office, mentor young women starting out their careers to lead. I would not be here were it not for many people, women and men, who encourage me to get more engaged, to run for office, to seek leadership positions, including encouraging our granddaughters and daughters to do so. So every opportunity you have to encourage a woman you know, they say that women, you have to ask 7 times to run for office. I'm not really sure why, but women tend to say, no, not me. So make sure if you've asked the 6th time, go on to that 7th and make sure you encourage every woman and girl you know to run for office, to look for leadership positions. Okay, now we're going to go back to the vote. So we all know that expanding participation in our democracy strengthens it, as women's suffrage and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 did. Governor Wolf's administration has been highly committed to increasing both the security and the accessibility of the vote in Pennsylvania. And I'm incredibly proud of how much progress we have made in the last 2 years on both these fronts. So we required, about 2 years ago, we required all counties to upgrade their voting systems to new voter verifiable paper ballot systems, meeting the highest standards of accessibility and security. And as part of these upgrades, we created new statewide testing for accessibility so that voters with disabilities could have their options improved and available to all. So we created these standards, these testing, to make sure that voters with disabilities and poll workers were testing the new systems, and expert examiners were writing a report with recommendations based on that testing. At votespa.com, which is the Department of State's website, you could find all kinds of information, but one of the things that you can find is for each of these new voting systems in every county in the Commonwealth, you could go onto votespa.com. There's a county dropdown when you click on the new voting systems. And it will tell you, it will give you how-to instructions, links to videos, all kinds of information about the new systems. And it will also give voters detailed information about what accessibility options are available. We're also this fall implementing a tool so that voters with disabilities, including blind voters, may vote more easily by mail via an accessible ballot marking solution they can use independently from their home. As hopefully all of you know, we also passed historic bipartisan legislation in the fall called Act 77. And Act 77 created more voting reforms for Pennsylvania voters than any election law passed in the last 8 decades. And I'm not kidding. In the last 80 years, this law did more to give voting options to Pennsylvanians. Thank goodness one of those options that it included was the right to vote by mail without needing an excuse. Of course, the timing turned out to be critical due to COVID-19. All Pennsylvanians can, for any reason or no reason at all, now securely vote from the safety of their own homes during the pandemic and afterwards. Act 77 also allows in-person early voting, which allows every eligible voter to go in person to your county election office and cast your ballot weeks before Election Day. We also created an online application for mail ballots, mail and absentee ballots, both in English and Spanish. And then voters who speak other languages can call toll-free 877-VOTES-PA to receive free interpreter services in nearly every language. We are also providing prepaid postage for mail-in and absentee ballots. So any voter who wants to vote by mail does not have to take the time or worry about safety or waiting in line at a post office. It's prepaid by us at the Department of State. You can just stick it in a box and it will be free. We have also not stopped on the security front, election security. We have continued, despite all the other things that we're thinking about right now with COVID-19 and a million other factors, the Department of State and our federal, state, and local partners have continued to add multiple layers of protection to our election security, including 24/7 continuous network monitoring, firewalls, encryption, password protection, multi-factor authentication, training, continuity of operations planning, as well as risk limiting audits and many other controls to protect our systems. So how can you help us? So I'm going to end with talking about what options are available to voters. And so I really, and this is how you can help us. So any way you vote in the November election is going to be safe, secure, and accessible. So how can you help? One of the biggest issues we have right now, and you all see this every day in the news and social media, is there's so much misinformation out there and disinformation. And whether it's intentionally spreading inaccurate information or accidentally, it's a huge problem for voters. So we'd love your help in spreading accurate, clear information to everyone, including information about all of the voting options we now have in Pennsylvania. So to summarize what I said a little bit earlier, there are now 3 safe, secure, and accessible ways that all eligible voters can vote this year. So all voters can choose to vote by mail. Whether you have an excuse or not, doesn't matter. You go, but I really urge people, if you're going to vote by mail, if you haven't done it yet, go today. Go to votespa.com, don't wait. You all should be getting, if you haven't gotten already, within the next week, you'll be getting a postcard at your household, if you have a registered voter in your household, that will tell you about this right to vote by mail. We sent it to everybody because we wanted to make sure that nobody would miss this option. Go to votespa.com, click on your mail-in or absentee ballot application, get it in today. And as soon as you get your ballot, get it back. Because in the primary, we saw nearly 1.5 million voters take advantage of this new option. And we expect that that could actually double for November. So don't wait, do it today. And as soon as you get your ballot, which will be likely in late September or early October, send your ballot back in. You can deliver your ballot by mail. You can drop it off in person. And in many counties, they're having secure drop-off locations and drop boxes around the county. Stay tuned. That information will all be available on votespa.com shortly. Okay, so option 1, vote by mail. Option 2, vote early in person. And this is one of the least known, things about Act 77. Act 77 mandates that every county provide an option for every voter to go in person weeks ahead of Election Day. This is how I'm going to vote this year. I love this option. It's early voting in Pennsylvania. As soon as my county, I live in Bucks County, as soon as the county finalizes its ballot, which is probably going to be later this month, I'm going to go in person during a business hour. I'm going to make sure I know what hours they're open. A lot of counties, like Philadelphia, is going to have 17 election offices around the city. You know, I think Bucks is going to have several. You know, a number of the counties are going to have multiple election offices. Call the county, say what hours you're open. You can go in person, say I'm here to apply for a ballot. You submit your application, they'll hand you the ballot, they'll tell you, you know, what room to go to. You fill out the ballot and you can hand it in all in one visit, weeks ahead of Election Day. So you don't have to worry about the mail and you don't have to worry about lines on Election Day. So again, that's going to be starting in a couple of weeks after ballots are finalized. So the ballots are not ready yet. Okay, and then of course, there's the traditional old original option, which is still an excellent option, and it's to vote at your polling place on November 3rd. So polling places are going to be open the same hours they always are, from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. You're going to find normal polling place numbers. So they may not be the same polling place that you had historically, because COVID-19 has required the closing of, you know, healthcare facilities and senior facilities. But there's not going to be the consolidations that a lot of places saw in the spring, because thank goodness we're in a stable place with the pandemic, and a lot of polling places are going to be open normal amounts. You'll see it in your community. And again, polling places are also going to be posted online at VotesPA. And this is, again, going to be a safe, secure option. The Department of State is providing counties with masks, gloves, face shields, sneeze guards, those plastic dividers, hand sanitizer, floor marking tape to mark social distance, and other supplies so that every Pennsylvanian can safely exercise their right to vote. And, you know, do what you would do in a normal circumstance. Wear a mask, wash your hands before you go, wash your hands after you go. Treat it just like you would going to the supermarket or going to the bank. Be safe, maintain your social distance, and, you know, protect yourself and others. It's, you know, we all help each other by continuing to wear those masks. And then I also want to urge everybody to consider signing up to be a poll worker in your local community. My first job in elections was actually as a poll worker. And I have to say it changed my life. And I highly recommend the experience. It's really, if you are somebody who's like, you know what, I always vote, but I want to do more. I want to play a role in this democracy. Volunteer to be a poll worker. You could go to votespa.com. You could click on for more information about poll workers. And what we do is we connect with all 6 to 7 counties. So it doesn't matter what county you live in. We'll connect you with your county, and they'll reach out to you about being a poll worker. You really never feel so much like you're part of the wheel of democracy as you do when you're literally making it possible for your neighbors and friends to cast their vote. It is so rewarding. And then, you know, as I said earlier, help us reduce the risks of this misinformation and disinformation. It makes me, Twitter makes me crazy. It probably makes all of us crazy. You know, it's just so easy to click retweet, and people don't check to see whether it's actually accurate information. So you start out with wrong information and then it explodes. So any help you could be at making sure people know they should check votespa.com or call their county election office. They can call our 877-VOTES-PA toll-free number. If people get a robocall, you probably heard that there were some robocalls that came in Pennsylvania. Don't trust those voices. There are so many Unfortunately, there are so many people who will deliberately spread false information to try to suppress the vote. Do not let it happen, and don't let it happen to your neighbors and friends either. Make sure if you get a robocall or you see false information or something's dropped off at your home, call 877-VOTES-PA and report it to us. Tell your county, tell anybody you can think of. Like, this is critical. They need to rely only on trusted sources like votespa.com. Okay, I've been talking a long time. So today, I'm just going to close. Today, as we celebrate 100 years of women's suffrage, let's honor the sacrifices and fulfill the legacy of the suffragists and the voting rights activists who followed them by ensuring that no eligible voter is ever disenfranchised, by continuing to do everything we can to secure the integrity of American elections and safeguard them from outside interference, and encourage every eligible Pennsylvanian to vote in every election, including on November 3rd. Please join us and become this generation's valiant women and men of the vote. And in the words of suffragist Carrie Chapman Catt, let's all commit to help to curing, to fixing, to furthering the wrongs that need resistance, the right that needs assistance, and the future in the distance. Thank you all for continuing this legacy.
Thank you so much, Madam Secretary. We thank you for everything that you bring to our democracy and everything you bring to our Commonwealth. We're really excited about getting the word out about not just voter registration, voter education, but that key ingredient, that third rail of voting, which is to acknowledge that voter suppression will occur, and that it's the job of agencies like ours, the AG's office, certainly your office and your amazing leadership to bring that to people's attention. We just once again just want to thank you, and we're encouraged and also inspired, and we look forward to working with you in the near future.
Thank you, and thank you for all your leadership. And yeah, if there's anything we can do together, I'm always willing to do teletown halls, spread the word, you know, whatever we can do together. Thank you so much for all you're doing.
Thank you so much. Tamika?
Unmute myself. Can you all see and hear me?
We can hear you. I don't see you, but I know we're getting ready to move to the second half of our program.
Yes, there was a question. I'm reading in the chat. Okay, they said they can see me but not hear me. My video. Here we are. In the chat, we wanted to know. So the secretary said that it's okay.
Tamika?
Yes.
What we're going to do is move to the second part of the program, and all of the questions that emerge, we will send that to Madam Secretary through her office, okay?
Okay, very well. So I'm going to transition to Commissioner Sarathia, if she is online here.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. First, I want to say thank you so much to Chad and Tamika for putting together this amazing event, and to Secretary Boockvar for speaking so powerfully about the history of the suffrage movement. I'm honored to talk to you today about what my vote means to me. When I think about the women's suffrage movement and the 19th Amendment, I can't help but think about the women that were left out of that beautiful promise, that the vote would not be denied or abridged on the basis of sex. It's so simple, but at the time of the passage, the 19th Amendment was all but an empty promise to women of color. For those of us with Asian ancestry, we were not given access to the polls until the 1940s and the 1950s. For Indigenous people, it wasn't until 1948. And as Secretary Boockvar said, it wasn't until the Voting Rights Act of 1965 that the promise of the 15th and the 19th Amendment became closer to reality for Black women, especially in the South. Still today, voter suppression tactics, mass incarceration, and felon disenfranchisement laws limit voting access for many people of color. For those of us that have access to the ballot box, we have a privilege, and that makes our vote even more important. It gives us a voice, one that we can use to expand access for other eligible voters. More than expanding access to the franchise, my vote means showing up for my community and other women of color to demand access to basic needs, higher minimum wage, food security, and access to quality education. As a South Asian woman, I'm part of the strongest electorate in the fastest growing demographic in the United States. In fact, the South Asian population has grown more than 43% since 2011. And while immigration and language access remains an important issue in our community, it's not all that we care about. And because representation in local, state, and federal government matters, I use access to the ballot to demand representation. I find and support larger coalitions so that we can use our collective power to create change. And that's what my vote means to me. It means I can do the research, I can find candidates that match my values, that have my hopes and my vision for the future. I can support their campaign. I can give them my vote. No candidate or politician for that matter is perfect, and they won't reflect all of my values. But once they're in office, I can hold them accountable. I can demand action. And if they don't meet my expectations, I can deny them my vote in the next election. You know, I was talking to my mother yesterday. She was born in Pakistan in 1958. Please don't tell her that I told you the year. And she emigrated from Pakistan. She emigrated from Pakistan to the United States in the late 1970s. She became a naturalized citizen in 1988, just a year before I was born. And when I asked her about how she felt when she was naturalized, she said that she had never felt so powerful before. When I asked her about what it felt like to be able to vote in this country, she told me she felt like she finally had a voice. She said that she had never seen a place where there were peaceful elections and peaceful transfer of power between political parties. Our right to protest, our access to the courts, our freedom of expression, while imperfect and inherently biased, are values that many around the globe cannot even imagine. I remember as a child going with her to our polling place every single election. In fact, she made me drive home to the Lehigh Valley from Richmond, where I went to college, to vote with her for my first election. She taught me how lucky we were to have a vote and to be able to go to our polling places safely. A lot of people say, well, my vote doesn't really matter. And I've never really understood that statement. I've never thought of my vote as just one individual vote. I've always imagined it as a voice in a choir, one along with hundreds, thousands, millions of other votes from other communities that come together to proclaim our values. And maybe if we think about our vote in that larger context, we can understand just how powerful one extra voice can be, especially for communities that are often ignored or left behind. That one voice can be enough to tilt the scales. In every election, I remind myself that my vote matters, that my voice matters, and I tell myself that democracy is not passive. And for those of us who have come before me have sacrificed so much so that I can have this power. And in that prism, I have no choice but to be an active participant in the future of this country. That's why I vote. And if you have access to the ballot, I urge you to please exercise your privilege. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Sarathia. We really appreciate you sharing your rich narrative on the importance of the vote to you. We'll turn it back over to Tamika. And also, just publicly, thank you for everything that you do in your capacity as advocating for the commission and your role as commissioner. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Chad.
Thank you. Next, we're going to have reflections on voting from Vice Chairman Raquel Yinks. Commissioner Yinks is listening on the line. Can we have Commissioner Yinks join us? Can you hear us, Commissioner Yinks? Okay, she's listening to the program. What I'm going to do so that we can get her on, I'm going to call her on the phone and I'm going to have her on speaker. We can all listen to her because we want to make sure that we get her reflections on. So I'm getting her on the line.
I think that would be great, Carl. If you could go ahead and proceed with that, I think that's probably the best recommendation that has emerged. If you could please be so kind and proactive to call Dr. Yanks. Thank you.
Hello, my apologies. Somehow technology, it lost me. It dropped off. I had to join back to the meeting. What were you just saying?
Carl's going to call.
Tamika, I have Raquel as
You have her?
Dr. Yanks on here.
Okay.
Raquel, do you want to speak and see if everyone can hear you?
Absolutely. Can you hear me, Carl?
Looks like everyone can hear you. Go ahead.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
All right. Well, good afternoon to everybody. And I have been sitting here watching Chad, but unable to hear anything that was going on. The last I saw was when Chad took his glasses off. I don't know what that meant. But at any rate, my name is Dr. Raquel Yanks, and as Tamika told you, I'm the Vice Chair of the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission. I want to thank Chad for asking me to participate in this program, and it is my honor to do so. I want to start by just saying that I firmly believe that it is the most fundamental constitutional right, and critical voting is the most constitutional right and critical to the results of the election. We are so very fortunate to be able to live in this amazing country where every election cycle we get the opportunity to have our values heard and also to have our voice and have an impact on what's going to happen for the next couple of years. I'm sorry. I am a Latino woman who was fortunate enough to be born in a Spanish-speaking country where everyone that is born there becomes an American citizen by birth. And of course, I am referring to the island of Puerto Rico. I have also been fortunate enough to be educated in both Puerto Rico and in the United States, and I have lived in this country for all of my adult life. If we look back at the history of most of the Latin American countries, we realize that our culture is Spanish heritage and that it's a bit different from the culture in the United States. Demographics keep showing us how the Latino population is the fastest growing population in the United States. So when we talk about the voting issues, we need to take a hard look at the Latino women who, if they would be able to vote, could make a tremendous impact in the elections. But however, we know that many of the Latino women that live in this country are non-English speakers and are the voting rights are totally foreign to them. So in my opinion, we have a tremendous job of educating our Latino women when it comes to the voting rights, because not only probably they were not voting in their country, but now they are here and they don't understand the system and they don't understand the culture and they don't understand the value and the importance of their vote because it is their voices. Women that come from these countries, for the most part, follow whatever their husbands' incomes give them. And so somebody said at one time that most women anyhow vote the way that their husbands do because really they do not believe in their own thought process. And that is very sad for our women. Again, I will have to say to you that I know many Latina women where I live in Reading, and I know that they do not vote. And when I talk to them and try to talk to them how important it is for them to vote, they're scared. First of all, they said, well, you know, we have to use those machines that we don't know how to use, or we can read the instructions in the machine. So it is very difficult for these women to exercise their voting right. And that saddens me, because I know how important it has been for me to be able to exercise my voting right. Again, I would say that we need to educate these women. For example, this program that we watched today, and I watch intently and I listen intently and I learn a lot. How many Latina women would have access to something like this? They do not know the technology. They do not understand what it is that they have to do or where they have to go. It is a humongous problem, but again, I must reiterate to you that if we really believe that we need those votes from the Latino women, which I believe in my heart and soul that we need their vote, we need to begin by making it accessible for them and in educating them and giving them the opportunity to be able to vote. Because nothing will empower you more than to know that in a couple of months, you are going to be able to go to that voting place and exercise your vote and make a difference in what's going to happen in this country for the next 4 years. And if I would not understand the process, if I would not be able to vote, I would feel that I have been robbed of the opportunity of having my voice raised. I do not mean to get emotional about this topic, but I do firmly believe that we need to take a look at what is happening to the Latino women in this country. Thank you so much, and I hope that I did what you needed me to do.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Yanks. And as you know, you should never have to apologize for your inspiration and your passion. It's something that I think certainly should be modeled not only in our commission, but throughout the Commonwealth with other individuals who are on boards and commissions as well. And as you know, I took my glasses off because my eyes are very tired. I think it's you and Carl who are always reminding me to get some rest. And I'm now averaging at least 3 hours per day, where I was only averaging 2 hours per day. So that's the only reason why I took my glasses off. But we'll turn it over to Tamika so that she can provide her impressions and narrative around the impact of voting from her perspective. And then we'll conclude so that we can get back to those things that we're called to do by our mission. And once again, thank you, Carl, for navigating through that for us. And thank you for your attempt as well, Tamika. So we'll take it over to Tamika.
Okay. Thank you, EJ. The title of my reflection is called I Vote Because We Matter. I vote because Sojourner couldn't. And wasn't she a woman? That's the question she posed at the 1851 Ohio Women's Convention, where the plight of Black women got no attention. I vote against the tide that Harriet fought to wade in the water for our freedom from enslavement. And though it said that she never lost a passenger, the fact remains that the Underground Railroad wasn't no first-class train. I vote because, like Fannie Lou, being sick and tired ain't nothing new. I vote because Miss Hamer didn't speak at the DNC for fame or fortune, but so the Blacks in Mississippi could get their rightful portion. I vote because I am a Chisholm, and it's in my blood. And like my Aunt Shirley, who was the first African-American woman to be elected to the U.S. Congress, before Ferraro or Clinton, she was the first woman to run for the Democratic Party's presidential nomination. She ran on the platform of unbought and unbossed, and of this, I am extremely proud. I vote because Carol Mosley gave us brawn, and because until 17 years after she left office, she remained the first and only African-American woman to ever be elected to the U.S. Senate. And then there came Kamala. I vote because Miss Dorothy wanted us to reach our full height. Not only was she an advisor to every occupant of the Oval since FDR, but for 40 years, Dorothy Height served as the president of the National Council of Negro Women. I vote because Mother Maya taught me that I'm a woman, phenomenal woman, that's me. Her words remind me daily that you may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still like air, I'll rise. Dr. Maya Angelou was the Poet Laureate of the United States and a lifetime civil rights activist. I vote because Sandra Bland gave her life so we could have spice. I vote because Nicole Paltry was to become Sean Bell's wife on the day that 50 shots took his life. I vote because Trayvon Martin could have been my son. I vote because, like Philando Castile, my brother is a concealed carry permit, and sometimes he likes to ride in the passenger side of his wife's ride. And no, he's not trying to holler at you or shoot you with his baby daughters in the back seat. I vote because my grandmother cleaned offices so that I could run one. I vote because a Story County, North Carolina mountain girl was at the top of her class, but didn't have the cash to go to medical school, but she worked so that I could if I wanted to. I vote for my sons and my daughters because having President Barack Hussein Obama, First Lady Michelle, Sasha and Malia in the White House revolutionized the way Black children see themselves. I vote because now the presidency is a possibility. I vote because on February 19th, 1990, Winnie and Nelson won their fight to have him released from a South African prison, but it cost him 27 years of his life. And last but not least, I vote because once upon a time back in 1908, there were 16 ladies with a vision great, and they were Alpha, Kappa Alpha. I vote because it matters. I vote because they mattered. I vote because we matter. Thank you. So that is our program for this afternoon, ED. It is 1:04, so if you would like to, there was a very important question. I don't want to keep us from our work, but there's something that while we have the attention of the secretary, if we could have that answered for our staff. There was a question about the Hatch Act. I think that would be very, very helpful to us.
Yeah, and can I just say, beautiful words, really.
Thank you.
Really, yeah, very powerful. So I think the answer is no, that you can't, most government workers can't serve, so while they're government workers. So let me double check if there's I know there are exceptions, but I think that mostly you can't while you're a government worker. That was the question.
Yeah,
right?
and we'll have our chief counsel, Madam Secretary, work with your office, and then we'll get the correct data out to our staff. I just want to say, while we have this moment with the staff, that two words just come to my mind, and a lot of it is a combination of the eloquence that was presented to us by the Madam Secretary, Commissioner Sarathia, Commissioner Yanks, and Tamika Hatcher, which is never underestimate your very own resolve and how resilient you are against the backdrop of a pandemic, which some don't want to put into the conversation, which is a global and economic crisis. Those individuals who are engaged in macroeconomics, they forecasted this when they were looking at things, not because the economists or the London Financial Times verbalized that we were headed to this place, and not necessarily because of the person who's in the Oval Office. This is probably a 3 decades in the making financial economic collapse of our democracy, because for a protracted period of time, we were in war, and the military industrial complex was saturating the money from our very democracy. But resolve comes to mind and resiliency comes to mind. And we're not the only agency that has a lack of complement. The whole entire Commonwealth is being asked to do more with less. And that will push our backs against the wall. And that's where factors of resiliency really emerges. And resiliency is just meaning that when things are against you, you find out just who and what you are. And so we have to lean on not only our mission, but events like this and multiple other events that we're going to be doing, because it takes us away from the work for but a moment, because there is so much that's on the shoulders of this agency. But once again, perspective really matters. And the perspective is that 50 to 60 million people are applying, or have applied and continue to apply for unemployment. It doesn't mean that our context is not our context, but whether you're looking at CNN, MSNBC, or Fox News, on that right hand of the ticker, we're not part of those individuals who have died because of coronavirus. And so I just wanted to thank the staff from all 3 regional offices, and then also want to take the time to thank our colleagues. I saw Ann Korb here, I saw Linda Miller here, and multiple others. And my grandmother used to always say, don't start naming names because you may forget someone. But everyone that was here, I just want to take the time to thank you in your own special way of supporting the PHRC, which is not me as the executive director, but under the shared leadership philosophy. I'm the executive director, but every day I come to the context knowing that it's only for a moment of time that we're here on the face of the earth. And so while we're here, whether that's what Chadwick Boseman said, which is he wanted to leave everything out before he left, and he left at the age of 43. And so once again, Madam Secretary, inspired by you, inspired by Commissioner Sarathia, not because of what she did today or what Dr. Yanks did today, but what they do every single day in supporting this commission. So staff, enjoy your upcoming weekend, enjoy it and embrace it in the way that you do it. I know that we have a few more hours for our workday, and I just want to thank you, Tamika, for capturing this vision and supporting this, because it was very important for me to say, hey, we know when Women's History Month is, but we want to be able to reschedule it. We're going to be doing the same thing for Pride Month, and there's nothing wrong with doing it in the month that it's not supposed to be in, quote unquote. So once again, everyone, thank you so very much, and let's continue to trend in the direction that we're called to trend. Have a great day, and once again, thank you, Madam Secretary.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you for all you do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Vote. Vote, 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 vote. Vote.
Yep,
Vote.
certainly.
Just gonna end there. Vote.
Yes.
Thanks.